Oh, hey my friend. What brings you here today? Also going to read a book with me? Awesome. Well, I don't really remember where we were last time, so let's just continue reading The Hobbit. Really enjoyed this book so far. Okay, what can I do for you, my dwarves? He said. Killy at your service, said the one, and Philly added the other, and they both swept off their blue hoods and bowed. At yours and your family's, replied Bilbo, remembering his menace this time. Dwalling and Balin here already, I see, said Killy. Let us join the throng. Throng? Thought Mr. Baggins. I don't like the sound of that. I really must sit down for a minute and collect my wits, and have a drink. He had only just had a sip in the corner, while the four dwarfs sat round the table and walked about the mines and gauls and troubles with the goblins, and the depressions, the depredations of dragons, and lots of other things which he did not understand, and did not want to, for they sounded much too adventurous. When ding-dong, a ling-dang, his bell rang again, as if some naughty little hobbit boy was trying to pull the handle off. That sounds a bit kinky. Interesting. Someone at the door, he said, blinking. Some four, I should say by the sound, said Philly. Besides, we saw them coming along behind us in the distance. Little sneaky dwarfs. Imagine if midgets were like this in real life. Could you imagine the shit that they would cause? Well, luckily they can't reach much, can they? No offense. The poor little hobbit sat down in the hall and put his head in his hands and wondered what had happened, and what was going to happen, and whether they would all stay to supper. Then the bell rang again, louder than ever, and he had to run to the door. It was not 4 after all, but it was 5. Another dwarf had come along while he was wandering in the hall. He had hardly turned the knob before they were all inside, bowing and saying, at your service. One after another, Dory, Nori, Ori, Oin, and Gloin were their names, and very soon 2 purple hoods, a grey hood, a brown hood, and a white hood were hanging on the pegs, and off they marched with their broad hands stuck in their gold and silver belts to join the others. Already it had almost become a throng. I don't know what that word means. What were we at? Throng. Yes, some called for ale and some for porter. Ginger beer ale, I guess. Nasty. And one for coffee, and all of them for cakes. So the hobbit was kept very busy for a while. A big jar of coffee had just been set in the hearth. The seed cakes were gone, and the dwarfs were scattering, starting on a round of buttered scones. Oh yeah, scones are delicious. Yum yum, they're British. When there came a loud knock, not a ring, but a hard rat-tat, on the hobbit's beautiful green door. Somebody was banging with a stick. Oh, must be my handicapped grandmother. I'm just kidding. Bilbo rushed along the passage, very angry, and altogether bewildered and bewildered. This was the most awkward Wednesday he had ever remembered. He pulled open the door with a jerk, and they all fell in, one on top of the other. More dwarfs, 4 more, and there was Gandalf behind, leaning on his staff and laughing. He had made quite a dent on the beautiful door. He had also, by the way, knocked out the secret mark that he had put there the morning before. Very interesting. If you've watched The Hobbit, the movie, you already know what scene this is at his house. Very interesting. You can only imagine the scene when you've seen the movie and then read the book. Trust me, you don't want to miss out The Hobbit. I think The Hobbit is from 2015-16. Was way ahead of its time graphic-wise. Anyways, let's not get carried away. Carefully, carefully, he said. It is not like you, Bilbo, to keep friends waiting on the mat, and then open the door like a popgun. Let me introduce before Bofur, Bombur, and especially Thorin. He's a sicko. At your service, said Bifur, Bofur, and Bombur, standing in a row. Then they hung up 2 yellow hoods and a pale green one, and also a sky blue one with a long silver tassel. This last belonged to Thorin. He's the king of their paradise. An enormously important dwarf. In fact, no other than the great Thorin Oakenshield himself, who was not at all pleased at falling flat on Bilbo's met with Bifur, Bofur, and Bombur on top of him. For one thing, Bombur was immediately fat and heavy. Thorin indeed was very hearty. Kind of weird. And said nothing about service. But poor Mr. Baggins said he was sorry so many times that at last he grunted, "Pray don't mention it," and stopped frowning. "Now we are all here," said Gandalf, looking at the row of 13 hoods. Were there 13 dwarves? I thought there were only 7. Must have been a while since I watched the movie. Well, actually, that's not true. I watched it last year at my tiny house. The best detachable party hoods, and his own head hanging on the pegs. Quite a merry gathering, I hope. There is something left for the latecomers to eat and drink. What's that? Tea? No, thank you. A little red wine? I think for me. And for me, said Thorin, and raspberry jam and apple tart, said before. And mince pie and cheese, said Beaufort. These names sound very Turkish. I wonder if this is inspired by Turkish names or Albanian names. No offense, I love my Turkish brothers and sisters. Phenomenal food, great culture, and not very hardworking people. Just like the Polish and Mexican. Very hardworking, very nice, humble people. But these names sound a bit Turkish, Albanian, like Middle Eastern type of. Could just be that they're just random names, I suppose, I don't know. And pork pie and salad, said Bombor, so he's not vegetarian, obviously. Neither am I. And more cakes and ale and coffee, if you don't mind, called the other dwarfs through the door. Put on a few eggs, there's a good fellow. Gandalf called after him as the hobbit stumped off to the pantries and just bring out the cold chicken and pickles. Damn, crazy. Seems to know as much about the inside of my larders as I do myself, thought Mr. Beggins, who was feeling positively flummoxed and was beginning to wonder whether a most wretched adventure had not come right into his house. And only if he knew what was going to happen next. He'd be surprised. By the time he had got all the bottles and dishes and knives and forks and glasses and plates and spoons and things piled up on big trays, he was getting very hot and red in the face and annoyed. This is a word I don't know. Confiscate and be bothered these dwarfs, he said aloud. Why don't they come and lend a hand? Lo and behold, there stood Balin and Dwelling at the door of the kitchen, and Philly and Kitty behind them, and before he could say knife, they had whisked the trays and a couple of small tables into the parlour and set out everything afresh. Well, I gotta say, the story is insane. You're probably faster just doing the movie than the book. Unless you're into fast reading, obviously. Where were we? Okay. Gandalf sat at the head of the party with the 13 dwarves all round, and Bilbo sat on a stool at the fireside nibbling at a biscuit. His appetite was quite taken away, and trying to look at it as if it was all perfectly ordinary, and not in the least an adventure. The dwarves ate and talked, and the time got on. At last they pushed their chairs back, and Bilbo made a move to collect the plates and glasses. I suppose you will all stay to supper, he said in his politest, unimpressing tones. Of course, said Thorin, and after. We shan't get through the business till late, and we must have some music first. Now to clear up. Thereupon the 12 dwarves, not Thorin, he was too important, and stayed talking to Gandalf, jumped to their feet and made tall piles of all the things. Off they went, not waiting for trays, balancing columns of plates, each with a bottle on the top, with one hand, while the hobbit ran after them, almost speaking with fright. Please be careful, and please don't trouble. I can't manage. But the dwarves only decided to sing. I gotta say, what a fascinating book this is. It's a very big book. I don't know where you buy this book, but we had it. I don't know who bought this. What a phenomenal story this is. And of course they did none of these dreadful things, and everything was cleaned and put away as quick as lightning, while the hobbit was turning round and round in the middle of the kitchen, trying to see what they were doing. Then they went back and found Thorin with his feet on the fender, smoking a pipe. Smoking the gas, huh? I didn't know they were doing that in those times. He was blowing the most enormous smoking rings, and wherever he told one to go, it went up the chimney, or behind the clock on his mantelpiece, or under the table, or round and round the ceiling. But wherever it went, it was not quick enough to escape Gandalf. Pop! He sent a smaller smoke ring from his short clay pipe straight through each one of Thorin's. Then Gandalf's smoke ring would go green and come back to hover over the wizard's head. He had a cloud of them about him already, and in the dim light it made him look strange and sorcerous. Bilbo stood still and watched. He loved smoke rings, and then he blushed to think how proud he had been yesterday morning of the smoke rings he had sent up the wind over the hill. "Now for some music," said Thorin. "Bring out the instruments." Kenny and Fiddy rushed for the bags and brought back little fiddles. Don't know what that is, instruments? Dory, Nori, and Ori brought out flutes from somewhere inside their coats. Bombo produced a drum from the hall. Biffer and Buffer went out too and came back with clarinets that they had left among the walking sticks. Dorlin and Balin said, "Excuse me, I left mine in the porch." "I just bring mine in with you," said Thorin. They came back with vials as big as themselves, and with Thorin's harp wrapped in a green cloth. It was a beautiful golden harp, and then Thorin struck in. The music began all at once, so sudden and sweet that Bilbo forgot everything else and was swept away into dark lands under strange moons, far over the water, and very far from his hobbit hole under the hill. The dark came into the room from the little window that opened in the side of the hill. The firelight flickered. It was April, and still they played on, while the shadow of Gandalf's beard wagged against the wall. The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down, and the shadows were lost, and still they played on. And suddenly first one and then another began to sing as they played. Deep-throated singing of the dwarves in the deep places of their ancient homes. And this is like a fragment of the song, if it can be like their song without the music. We're not going to read that just in case we get copyrighted. You never know. You'd be surprised. Okay, let's continue, my friend. As they sang, the hobbit felt the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through them. A fierce and a generous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. Then something took his woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out of the window. The stars were out in a dark sky above the trees. He thought of the jewels of the doors shining in dark caverns. Suddenly in the wood behind the water a flame leaped up, probably somebody lighting a wood fire, and he thought of plundering dragons settling on his quiet ale and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was plain Mr. Baggins of Backend Underhill again. He got up trembling. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp, and more than half a mind to pretend to, and go and hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar, and not come out again until all the dwarves had gone away. So basically, he wanted to go sleep. They were making too much noise, so he went to his wine cellar. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Suddenly he found that the music and the singing had stopped, and they were all looking at him with eyes shining in the dark. "Where are you going?" said Thorin, in a tone that seemed to show that he guessed both halves of the hobbit's minds. "What about a little light?" said Bilbo apologetically. "We like the dark," said all the dwarves. "Dark for dark business. There are many hours before dawn." "Of course," said Bilbo, and sat down in a hurry. He missed the stool and sat in the fender, knocking over the poker and shovel with a crash. "Hush," said Gandalf. "Let Thorin speak." And this is how Thorin began. "Gandalf, dwarves, and Mr. Baggins, we are met together in the house of a friend and fellow conspirator. This most excellent and odious hobbit, may his hair on his toes never fall out. All praise to his wines and ale." He paused for a breath and for a polite remark from the hobbit, but the compliments were quite lost on poor Bilbo Baggins, who was wagging his mouth in protest at being called odious and worst of all fellow conspirator. Though no noise came out, he was so flummoxed, so Thorin went on. "Here we go. We are met to discuss our plans, our ways, means, policies, and devices." They had devices back then? "We shall soon before the break of day start on our long journey. A journey from which some of us, or perhaps all of us, except our friend and counselor, the ingenious wizard Gandalf, may never return. It is a solemn moment. Our object is, I take it well known to us all, to the estimable Mr. Baggins, and perhaps to one of those of the younger dwarves. I think I should be right in naming Cully and Philly for instance. The exact situation at the moment may require a little brief explanation." This was Thorin's style. He was an important dwarf. If he had been allowed, he would probably have gone on like this until he was out of breath, without telling anyone there anything that was not known already. But it was rudely interrupted. Poor Bilbo couldn't hear it any longer. It may never return. He began to feel like a shriek coming up inside, and very soon it burst out like the whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel. All the dwarves sprang up, knocking over the table. Gandalf struck a blue light on the end of this magic wand staff, and in Jesus, man, what are these words? And in its firework glare, the poor little hobbit could be seen kneeling on the hearthrug, shaking like a jelly that was melting. Then he fell flat on the floor and kept on calling out, "Struck by lightning! Struck by lightning!" over and over again, and that was all they could get out of him for a long time. So they took him and laid him out of the way on the drawing room sofa with a drink at his elbow, and they went back to their dog business. "Excitable little fellow," said Gandalf as they sat down again. "Gets funny, queer fits, but he is one of the best, as fierce as a dragon in a pinch." Okay, I think we read this page and then we'll end it. If you have ever seen a dragon in a pinch, you will realize that this was only poetical exaggerations applied to any hobbit, even to Ortug's great-great-uncle Balrog, who was so huge for a hobbit that he could ride a horse. He charged the ranks of the goblins of Mount Grim in the Battle of the Green Fields, and knocked that King Garfimbul's head clean off with a wooden club. It sailed 100 yards through the air and went down a rabbit hole, and in this way the battle was won and the game of golf invented at the same moment. See, those are these type of things you don't get in the movie, like this stuff that is very interesting added to the movie, a little bit exaggerated, but I love a book as well. I haven't read a book for years, so this is the first time in a very long time. In the meanwhile, however, Balrog's gentler descendant was reviving in the drawing room. After a while, in a drink, he crept nervously to the door of the parlour. This is what he heard: glowing, speaking humph, or some snort more or less like that. What will he do you think? Is it all very well for Gandalf to talk about this hobbit being fierce, but one shriek like that in a moment of excitement would be enough to wake the dragon and all his relatives and kill a lot of us. Page 22. Wow, what a book. Now before we end this video, would you like me to continue making this as a series perhaps? It's going to be a long series, just letting you know. Maybe the videos will have to be longer perhaps. I don't mind doing that, 40 to 50 minutes. I am letting you know it is about 400 pages. The Hobbit. As I said before, I have watched The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Amazing movie. If you like horror mixed with action, drama, but majority of it is drama, heart-pumping movie, and fantasy, then The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings is for you. Well, my friend, thank you so much for watching this video.